In private practice, if my goal is to work with 15 or 20 people a week, I'm never going to be able to work with everybody.
This is Herd Business School, where we sit down with private practice owners and industry experts to learn about the business of therapy together. I'm your host, Michael Fulweiler. Running a private practice comes with financial challenges that aren't always obvious at the start. Today's guest, Kelly McKenna, brings a wealth of knowledge on entrepreneurship, combining her clinical expertise as a licensed clinical social worker with her business acumen from her MBA. Kelly has successfully built a thriving practice using Instagram, where her account Sit With Kelly has nearly 100,000 followers. She also shares insights with thousands of therapists through a second Instagram account, Business of Therapy, and recently launched the Business of Therapy podcast. In this episode, Kelly talks about her transition from nonprofit work to private practice and how she leveraged Instagram to make $250,000 in her first year. She also dives into her business coaching services and the strategies she uses to help other therapists succeed. Kelly's insights on marketing, growth, and building a practice that fits your personal style are invaluable. I especially appreciate her transparency about finances. Here's my conversation with Kelly McKenna. Enjoy. Kelly McKenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Very excited to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we launched the show. You're the second therapist that we've had on who has an MBA.
Awesome.
Which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
So I'd love to start there. In researching for this interview, I actually read that you were the first person to get an MSW and MBA from Florida State. How did that come about?
Honestly, I feel like this is kind of a silly answer, but I am have always been kind of this anxious overachiever person. So I was in a magnet program in high school, and I ended up graduating high school with 39 college credits. And so I kind of flew through undergrad in 2 years, and I really wanted to have a full 4-year experience. And social work is interesting that if you get your bachelor's in social work, it's just 1 extra year to get your master's, versus if you got your bachelor's in something else, it's a 2-year program for your master's. So I had gotten my bachelor's in social work, and I was like, I want to do 2 more years here. And so I decided I was going to get my MSW and my MBA. And so it was honestly just I think me trying to do the absolute most with the least amount of time, if I'm being totally honest about what really drove me to do it. And on top of that, I really wanted to do nonprofit management. So I had goals of being a program director one day, of managing a team. And so I thought that that would be really, really helpful. And so it's why I kind of picked that as the dual option as opposed to something else.
I was wondering about the timeline because I was looking at your LinkedIn, looking at the years, and I was like, wait a second, she got both her MSW and MBA in 2 years.
Yeah.
That
it was
sounds
cool
wild.
too. They had a dual program at Florida State. And so you basically took out, I think it was 1 or 2 semesters of doing each program, because they kind of found the overlap between here's some MSW classes and MBA classes that are kind of achieving the same thing. And so that was really cool too.
What were some takeaways from your MBA program for you, looking back now as a business owner? Were there certain things that were helpful for you, whether it was certain concepts or classes that you took?
I mean, I think for me, it was just becoming familiar with the business side of things, I think is something that so few therapists really spend any time doing, of even just bookkeeping and stuff. Taking a basic accounting class was really helpful. I loved the marketing classes and all the case studies they would have us do and stuff. I think was so interesting with I think for me, I realized every business is going to have their problems and challenges. In an MBA program, you do all these Harvard Business School case studies of McDonald's and Coca-Cola and all this stuff. And none of these businesses are without challenges, but what makes them really strong is their ability to think critically and to work through them. And so that's something that I think has been really helpful for me, of just recognizing when stuff goes wrong, it doesn't mean that this isn't a good idea or the business is failing or something. It's just kind of a normal part of owning a business.
Yeah, that's such a great point. You don't need an MBA to be a therapist.
Oh, totally.
It's helpful to have a basic understanding of business, right? And that's part of our goal with this show at Harvard Business School to provide, some of that business education that therapists didn't get in grad school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely there's tons of stuff about capital markets and stuff that I've never used to this day, either in private practice or managing a large team and large budget at a nonprofit. And so I don't necessarily think that therapists need to or should get an MBA, but I think it's so important to get comfortable talking about money, looking at money, making financial decisions, and then also marketing too, I think is huge.
Definitely. So you go into nonprofit after grad school. At what point did you start to make the transition into private practice?
So I worked in nonprofits for 7 years in New York City, and I was working mostly in homeless programs, and we got a new grant that we were going to have a team of therapists come on for our agency, and I was going to be in charge of supervising them. And when I was right out of grad school, I was doing therapy. I got my clinical hours to get my LCSW, but I hadn't done therapy at all since then. And so I had a ton of imposter syndrome and was how am I going to supervise? We were interviewing really great clinicians. And I'm I'm supposed to be supervising them. They're not going to trust a word that's coming out of my mouth. Who am I to know this? And so I decided that I was going to start working at a group practice in the evenings, just that way I could kind of be in it with them, kind of freshen up my clinical skills. And so I started to do that. I had one day where I saw clients in person. And then the next day that I was scheduled to come in, COVID hit and we shut down and went virtual. And so it was I think it's the perfect combination for me, honestly, of I had been this idea of I'm going to go out and start my own private practice or rent an office or something was not at all on my radar, but I was really in the building stage. So I had 2 clients at the time that we went virtual. And so I was still getting new clients, but kind of on my own from Psychology Today. I was seeing them in my apartment. I honestly felt no affinity towards the group practice owner. I met him once during an interview. And so I quickly started to question, why am I giving half of my revenue to this guy? I had done some consulting work, so I had an LLC in place already and was just kind of I'm going to see a few of these clients on my own. And so it did not start at all with plans of kind of making a full transition, but it quickly kind of went that way because I was having so much fun doing it.
Sounds like it was good timing.
Yeah.
And then you went on to make $250,000 in your first year of private practice, which I want to talk about money and how you talk about money because I love all of that.
Yeah.
I'd love to just break down now kind of in retrospect, how you did that. It sounds like you were able to start seeing clients. You're virtual, which is nice. So it's, you don't have to go out and get an office. How did you start to expand your practice? Did you have a niche right from the beginning?
Yeah.
What was that process like?
So I guess I should clarify. I made $250,000 my first year in private practice is my first year full-time in private practice. So I kind of had a year in between where I was still working my nonprofit job and was kind of at the group practice and kind of on my own. And so during that time, my income from private practice was relatively low because we were taking insurance through this group practice. So they paid the practice $90 a session and I was getting paid $45 a session. And so that still felt great money in my pocket. It was nice to have, but it was not at all enough for me to quit my full-time job in a nonprofit for. And so kind of building and having some clients on my own, I was still seeing those through insurance too. And so that was around $100 a session. And that really helped to increase my income quite a bit and made me actually consider is this something I want to do? And when I decided yes, it is, I had the conversation with the group practice owner that I'm done taking any new clients that you're sending me. I'm kind of going to discharge these people or take them with me. He was kind enough to let me transition them to my own practice. And at that point, I decided I'm going to make an Instagram. And really my goal was maybe I'll get a few private pay clients. I was honestly even open to insurance at the time too. I was just kind of if I'm going to really go all in with this and quit my job, I should probably be doing a little bit more of active marketing. And things took off pretty quickly. So I was making also a lot of friends with other therapists on Instagram, which was so fun. And there was a few therapists who I was talking to that were hey, I'm totally full. This is COVID times. Can I send people your way? And I said, yes. They said, okay, like they're not insurance, they're private pay. What's your rate? And this one woman, Julia, I told her 150, and she was like, I charge like $400 a session. I can't send people to you for 150. They're not going to think that you're like a good therapist or looking for the best of the best. Would you be open to increasing your rate to 250? I had never had a private pay client at this point. I'm like, you want me to charge 250 and you're going to send me somebody? Sure, I'll do that. And it was so cool. I had like my first $250 client. And then shortly thereafter, I started getting them on my own from Instagram directly. And it just really, I think, made private practice so much more sustainable. And the idea that I could earn a ton of money in private practice was like much more reasonable to expect than when I was making $45 an hour at a group practice.
Definitely. It's such a great point you're bringing up. I think when therapists think about being on social media and on Instagram in particular, it's about like reaching clients.
Yep.
And actually, social media is such a great way to network with other therapists.
Totally.
And if like you're just starting out on Instagram, just like finding a bunch of therapists, follow them, engage with their content,
yep.
Send them a DM, introduce yourself, like build that relationship, maybe jump on a call.
Yep.
They'll start engaging with your content, sharing your content. It's just a great way to build your network, but also build your audience.
And I think it's huge too of like, surrounding yourself with people who are also ahead of where you are. So often I find that therapists, which makes sense, right? Like they kind of want to talk to people that are in that same shared experience of them. The people who are brand new to Instagram, brand new to private practice, looking for clients for the first time. And that's okay. Like it's good to have that camaraderie, but that's probably not going to fill your caseload, right? And so I think also making an effort to put yourself in the room or to get to know people who are established in private practice, because there's so many clinicians, myself included, who are full, who have a wait list, who have no desire or plan to take on new people, and are established and are still getting referrals. And so I think like allowing yourself to get to know some people in that stage too is super, super important.
Definitely. I think identifying people who are where you want to be.
Yes.
Right. And so learning from them, figuring out like how they got to that place. Cause like you could probably do that too, right? If you just like follow the model.
Yep, totally.
So how did that feel to charge $250 a session? Like, did you have anxiety about charging that? Or were you like, oh, this feels great. Like
so much anxiety. I mean, I felt like it would be stupid for me not to. And so I was kind of able to like push through that anxiety, but it felt really hard. I mean, at the time I was still working in a nonprofit. I made six figures in that nonprofit because I was in a senior leadership position, but most of our staff were making like $40,000 a year. I was working with people experiencing homelessness, like as my job. It was just like such a different world. And I think honestly, the harder part for me than like doing the session for $250 was this idea of people knowing I was doing the session for $250. So like having my price on my website. I remember when I decided I was going to quit my job, I was going back and forth with my husband for like 2 weeks. And I was like, do I take my rates off of my website? Like when I tell people I'm quitting, all my coworkers are going to go look me up and they're going to see this. And like, what are they going to think about me? I was really afraid of like, what are my parents and my friends going to think about me? Like I'd kind of built this persona of like, I'm helping people that are in poverty. Like I felt very much like a good person kind of doing that other work. And so I think that it was a big identity shift for me to say, I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to work with a different population of people. It doesn't make me bad. And that there's still other ways that I can, give back, be participative in these other communities too.
It's easy to look at a therapist who's charging $250 or $275 and say they're making therapy inaccessible. I've seen the comments myself
totally.
On Instagram. And so I'm curious, like, how do you think about that now? And like, sort of what is your mindset around that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's always going to be like something is always going to be inaccessible for people, right? Like whether you're charging $250, $100, you're virtual, you're in person, there's always going to be, nothing's going to work for everybody, right? And so like when I worked in nonprofits, my job one, I was serving like 1,000 people per year. And so our goal was really to be accessible to a lot of people. And my job was to try and make that happen. Right. And so we would send people out to like people's homes or to the homeless shelter they were living at. We tried to get like additional grant funding to cover stuff that like our current grants couldn't cover. And that was kind of our job, was to make it really accessible. But in private practice, if my goal is to work with 15 or 20 people a week, I'm never going to be able to work with everybody. And so I kind of have permission to work with the people that work for me. And I think recognizing that, not everybody wants that either, right? Like there are plenty of therapists, you will find them in my comment section, who are like, I could never do that. I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel good to me. And that's great, right? Like they don't need to do that. And so there will be therapists who want to take Blue Cross. There will be therapists who want to work in community mental health. There will be therapists who want to work in hospitals or inpatient. And like, that's all good. And therapy in private practice is like okay to be inaccessible, I guess, right? Like there are community mental health agencies, there are nonprofits, there are group practices, there are like all these kind of other options. And it's okay if you want to say, I want to be like a really highly skilled, really present therapist for people that want that, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it's a great point. I think that like if every therapist was charging $275 an hour, therapy would be inaccessible for a lot of people, right? But there's, that's just one business model.
Yep.
That's okay. And not every therapist is going to want to do that. Also, just based on the populations that they want to work with as well.
I think too, like if in my dream world, right, if every therapist charged $275 a session, I think that insurance companies would be forced to say, okay, we're going to increase our reimbursement rates for therapists and pay them $275 a session, in which case I would happily be in network with insurance. I would teach other therapists how to be in network with insurance. Like that would become my jam. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with, being in network. But I think that the issue is that there's like such a huge discrepancy in pay between therapy and other like healthcare professionals. And so for me, that's where I'm like, okay, well, if insurance isn't going to reimburse therapists at this rate, then we kind of have to take it into our own hands.
The financial burden for making therapy accessible should not be on therapists.
Yes.
That's like a very strong perspective that I have. And there's also ways to make your services more accessible, even when you're charging premium rates, right? Like using a service like Mentaya that your clients can take advantage of their out-of-network billing. I know that you partner with them. Could you talk about how that works for your practice?
Yeah. So for people who don't know what Mentaya is, it's basically a company that you submit like out-of-network claims through Mentaya. So maybe even let me back up a little bit for what out-of-network benefits are in case people aren't familiar. So there's kind of two ways that you can accept insurance. One is where you're in network with insurance, and that means that you bill the insurance company directly. So let's say that I'm in network with United Healthcare, right? I would go ahead and submit that paperwork to United. I would wait for them to pay me for the session. And I would also charge my client whatever their copay is, maybe $20 or $30 at the time of session. And when you're in network with insurance, the insurance company picks the rate. And that's kind of what you see is what you get. You also have the option to be an out-of-network provider. And people can pick what kind of health insurance plan they want, usually through their employer. And the more expensive ones tend to have out-of-network benefits. And what that means is that people are able to pick any provider, whether they accept United or not, and that they can pay for the services and their insurance company will reimburse the client for a portion of the cost. And so that's kind of how I use insurance in my practice. And so basically, after each session, I will go ahead and submit a claim for clients who would like me to via Mentaya. And so that means that I'm sending their insurance company all the information, all the codes that they need, saying that we met and we had this session. And then Mentaya will follow up on the claim. Oftentimes insurance companies deny claims and they have to like refile and reappeal and all of this to help the clients get reimbursed. And it's really great because, especially for the people who are choosing these kind of more premium health insurance plans that include out-of-network benefits, they're paying in for this service, right? And so I'll speak for myself. I've changed insurance a few times over the years, but my last insurance, I would pay my own therapist $250 a session, and I got reimbursed $225 per session after I met like a $1,000 deductible. And so that was amazing, right? I was paying $25 a session to see a really, really great therapist. And I think that that's just like so helpful of helping people to use the insurance benefits that they do have without also compromising what I want to charge for my time.
It's a win-win, right? Like the therapist gets their full cash rate, the client gets really like a discount on that, assuming they have out-of-network benefits, and then they also have to hit their deductible first as well. And it's like sometimes that deductible can be high, which is tough. And then also therapists are able to offer sliding scale as well. Like an argument I've heard for charging premium fees is that because I charge $275 a session, that enables me to offer a sliding scale in my practice where I have slots that are, $100 or $50 a session. Because I charge those rates, I'm able to do that and kind of offset my income.
Totally. I think that that's like a really popular model for therapists. There's also a company called like Give an Hour where therapists can do an hour free of therapy, kind of like through a nonprofit. They help coordinate everything. Open Path Collective helps to kind of manage sliding scales. I think that there's so many options for therapists if you want to kind of provide like a lower cost therapy as a way to give back.
Yeah. I'd love to switch gears a little bit here and talk about your niche.
Sure.
I've heard you say on Instagram that like when someone is looking for a therapist that takes their insurance, like that's what they're prioritizing, right? But when someone's looking for someone who like really like specializes in what they are, trying to work through or they're struggling with, like they're willing to pay those premium rates because they're like looking for a specialist. So could you talk about how you've like integrated that into your practice and how you built your niche?
So when I started, I think I had an idea that niching down was important just from like understanding marketing, but I wasn't super clear on what I wanted that to be. And so I kind of tried on a few different things that I struggle with myself because most therapists, I think, end up niching down and working with a former version of them or a current version. So my first like foray into niching down was perfectionism. And it really, really, really triggered my perfectionism. Like I was spending probably 4 hours on an Instagram post, reading blog after blog after blog about perfectionism to like literally write like one sentence about what perfectionism was because I felt like it was so high stakes and I was going to get it wrong. And so I quickly realized like that was not for me. It wasn't working. It wasn't a lot of fun. And so then I kind of started doing anxiety and body image. And that felt like much easier for me. I think that those parts of me are a little bit more healed. It felt like, I could understand it more. It also helped that that was something that I talked with my friends about like all the time. And so it didn't feel like it was just me, but I kind of had some other experiences with that too. And I just kind of went for it. It's like adapted over time. But I think I also was starting to see, therapy clients in the group practice at this time and was really clear about like what clients do I feel really confident helping? What clients, again, like am I starting to feel some like anxiety around or imposter syndrome around? I worked with a few moms. I'm not a mom yet. And like that felt like a very imposter syndrome to me. So I was like, okay, like I know that doesn't want to be my specialty. I did really enjoy, I do work still, probably a third of my caseload is teens, but I actually don't market that on Instagram at all. And so that's been kind of fun to do, like just via networking, but also teens that kind of have those same issues of like anxiety and body image.
Important point you're bringing up here is that it's okay to try out different niches and like see if you like it or not and see if it works for you in your practice. And if it doesn't, like it's okay to change. I think a lot of therapists feel this pressure of like, I have to define this very clear niche for my business. And that just kind of like keeps them from moving forward. And so I think it's okay to just like try something and see if you like it.
Yeah. And I think like you're gonna change over time anyways, right? Like both you're gonna get more clarity about who you like to help. You're gonna get more clarity around like what you're excited to talk about all day, every day, online and in sessions. And you're going to change as a person, right? Like, maybe 10 years from now, I feel really confident and comfortable being a therapist for moms. And I'm like, I don't want to work with anybody that's not a mom because I'm not in that life stage at all or something. Who knows? But for now, that's what feels really good to me. And if and when I change my mind, I can totally, pivot too.
You were able to use Instagram to grow your practice like relatively quickly.
Yeah.
You now offer a membership for therapists who are, looking to grow their practice on Instagram. I'm curious, like, what are the most common mistakes that you see therapists make on Instagram?
Yeah. A few. One would be the not niching down piece, right? So like if you're making really generic content, nobody is going to like share it to their stories or send it to their friends, like group chat. They're not going to comment, right? Like you need to kind of take a stand with things. And I think that that's why niching down is so, so helpful. A second piece is like bringing your personality into it and like letting people see who you actually are, right? Like when you think about it, anxious millennial is not actually that niche down. Like what millennial is not anxious? I don't know. Most of us are. Right. But I think that it's like the way that I show up, the way that I talk about things that makes it really clear what version of anxious millennial, right? Even with like the stuff that I post that I'm doing, on the weekend, or I'm talking about my coffee or the clothes that I'm wearing or the pop culture things I'm sharing, right? Like my clients can see, oh, I relate to her. Like we have similarities in common here, because I'm able to show up as more than just somebody who's like, here's 3 signs of anxiety, right? And so I think that bringing your personality in is huge too. Video, I think, is really the best way to do that, letting people hear your voice, see your face, see your mannerisms. I think that that's huge. And then I would say the last thing is like, I feel like there's so much chatter in like the business Instagram space about how easy it is to make $1 zillion or to grow your Instagram page or to go viral. And I think that it really does like a disservice for a lot of people. And they end up not going as hard towards their goals as they should. So like if you're showing up on Instagram and you're posting twice a week and you're just putting a Canva graphic up there, you're probably not going to get clients from Instagram. You're probably not going to make $250,000 your first year. And like, that's okay if that's what you want. But if you want kind of like these exceptional results, it's going to require you to take exceptional action, consistent action. It's going to really require effort. And so I think that that's something I see too, of like not wanting to go all in because they're not getting results yet, and then expecting the results to come when it's like you're not giving yourself enough time to practice, enough opportunities to go viral. Of course, you're not getting the results yet,
Right. Yeah. And social media, there's like an amount of randomness to it too.
Yes.
Right. Like the joke is, I'll spend 10 hours crafting this like perfect Instagram reel and it'll get like 5 likes, and then I'll just like post something in 5 minutes and it'll go viral.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why I'm a huge fan of like spend 15 minutes on every reel and do a lot of them, right? Because if you keep playing your hand, something's going to stick. I posted every day for the entire first year that I started on Instagram. Now I post like 3 or 4 times a week, and that feels much more sustainable. But in the beginning, I really needed a lot of chances to go viral. I also needed a lot of chances to understand, what does my audience actually like? I needed a lot of chances to get comfortable on camera and to get like less awkward doing it. And so I think showing up with that like tenacity in the beginning was really, really important to having that quick success.
Yeah, I love this. The way I describe it is you just need shots on goal,
yes,
right? Like just
totally.
take shots, and then something's going to resonate. There's going to be a topic, or there's going to be a format that you're going to get signal back from your audience that like this is resonating with them. And then you double down on those things.
Yes.
Right? So you're just like trying a bunch of stuff. Oh, this thing worked. Like, how can I replicate this? Or how can I like post about this topic maybe in a different way, or, use a different caption or something like that.
Totally.
Yeah. I'd love to kind of unpack each topic that you mentioned. I love what you said about, are people sharing my content?
Yeah.
The advice that I've read on this is like, before you post something, your kind of like litmus test should be, is my ideal client or is my audience like going to share this post?
Yep.
Is it going to resonate with them enough that they're going to share it? And if not, it's probably not like good enough.
Yep.
And I think that's such a great indicator too, because I think we look at the vanity metrics of like, how many likes did this post get? But actually looking at how many shares your post got or how many saves,
Yep.
especially if it's something that's a little bit more personal, like, oh, maybe this person, they're not going to like share it with on their stories, but maybe they're going to save it and
come back to
at it later. That's like a really great way to evaluate that level of signal. And then I think personality is huge too, right? Because I think there's this perception of like, if I join this membership program where, we're getting, topics, well, like my content's going to be like everyone else's content, right? It's just like this template. And now I'm going to be like the Instagram therapist that's the same as every other therapist on Instagram, but no one else can be you.
Yep.
Right. And so like leaning into your own personality.
And I think being like so specific in your content is really how you achieve both of those things. So like, if you are really specific in the tips that you're giving or who they're for or the thoughts that somebody's having or whatever, like that's what makes them want to share it and feel so seen or so helped by it. And then the same goes with the Reels membership prompts. So like with the Reels membership prompts, we had one this week that was, I began blank when I started ... and then listing 4 things. So let me give you some examples that were included in the Reels membership. So I began feeling less anxious when I started. That one's okay, but it's not super specific, right? I began trusting my partner after infidelity when I started. Okay, we're getting a lot more specific there. I began feeling like myself again after having my first baby when I started, right? I began actually loving my body despite its flaws when I started, right? And so we can kind of be specific there with what is the thing that people are wanting to feel. And then you also get to like share the 4 things that you did that helped you to kind of get towards that goal. And I think that this is such a great example of how it can look really different depending on what your niche is, right? All of those videos are going to be so different. They're going to be so different in the shots that you decide to like put of yourself doing. Are you drinking a matcha and showing that you're kind of like a wellness girly? Are you walking into a gym class? Are you playing sports? Like there's so many different ways that you can structure that same video and show off your personality, show your clients what they need to see. And so they're really not all the same. It's more just like, how do I give you like a structure and a format to put your, genius in? And you're basically going to say the same thing as like 4 things to do to feel less anxious, but it sounds so much more appealing if you're like, I began feeling less anxious when I started doing these 4 things, right? It just kind of helps to personalize the content a little bit and bring you into it without needing to like spill your guts all over the internet.
Right. Yeah. And the nature of social media and of Instagram and TikTok in particular is that there are like trending audio or there's a trending format. And so like jumping on that trend is like, okay, right? Like you're not just copying someone else's content, which also happens.
Yeah.
And so I think having your own personality or your own take on it becomes important.
Totally. Yeah. And this comes with like a trending audio. It comes with set your camera to 2.8 seconds and do this, like all the instructions that you need to actually implement and like make sure that you're kind of doing what the algorithm wants. You're being specific enough that your clients want it. And it's like easy enough for you to kind of fill in the stuff that we talk about as therapists all day long.
Sure. For listeners who are interested in the Reels membership that you offer, where can they go to find out more information about it?
You can go to businessoftherapy.com/Reels-membership. Maybe we can include that link in the show notes. And if you use the code HERD, you can get your first month totally free. So feel free to try it out and see how you like it. After that, it's just $37 a month and you get 4 Reels ideas every single Monday.
Amazing. Thanks for offering that for our listeners. And $37 a month feels like a steal if you're getting a client a month, at least from Instagram.
Yeah.
So.
And I think just like the time that you save, right? Like how long would it take you to plan 16 Reels for the month? Quite a bit of time. And so I think even just like trading that back for the $37 is so worth it.
Definitely. Side note, I'm very jealous that you own Business of Therapy.
I had to buy it from somebody. The domain. Really? Yeah. There was like an inactive website. And I had like gotten the Instagram handle, but I was like, I want this website before I start posting. And I found whoever it was and he sold it to me for like $500. So very worth it.
Oh, that's not bad. Well, maybe we'll buy it from you. We can talk offline about that.
Not for sale.
Something that you also do on Instagram, which I love, and I think this is how I first started following you, was you post your income every month on Instagram on your business page. Could you talk about like when you started doing that and why you do it?
Yeah. So I started doing it right when I made like my second Instagram page, Business of Therapy. And I kind of knew that it like made a lot of sense for me to do. So maybe even backing up a little bit, the first time I ever talked about money online, I was featured in a Business Insider article, and I pitched Business Insider for this article. But in my mind, the article that I was pitching was about like mental health tech therapy startups and how they're like a disservice to therapists. And during our discussion, it came up, how much money I was making, and I had to send them all the financials and stuff. And they ended up titling this article, How This Virtual Therapist Made $250,000 Her First Year in Private Practice. And I was like, oh shit, that's not what I wanted to share with the world. And it was so scary. Like I had not announced my income to like my friends or my whatever. Like a normal person, I wasn't running around telling everybody exactly how much money I made. And I got like such positive feedback. I didn't have the Business of Therapy Instagram at the page, Just Sit with Kelly, but I had started my course and my membership already for therapists. And I had a ton of people join right after that article. It was like one of Business Insider's top performing articles. They did a follow-up piece of me. And so I was like, okay, like people really want to kind of hear about this. But it didn't feel great for me to talk about it on my Sit with Kelly Instagram page where I was trying to get therapy clients still. Like, I think it's just like a little icky to be like, hey, here's how rich you're making me. Yeah. Not the vibe.
Right. Yeah.
And so when I started my Business of Therapy Instagram page, I was like, okay, I should probably talk about this. Also, as I was saying earlier, like that woman, Julia, who kind of pushed me to charge $250, like, if she hadn't even told me that she was charging $400 a session, I would have never dreamed of charging $250. And there was just a ton of examples of like other women online kind of showing me what was possible, and that really opening my eyes and making me dream bigger. So I knew I kind of wanted to do that for people. And I did. Like my first one I did in January 2023. And it was like a top performing piece of content. So I decided I'll do it again in February 2023, top performing piece of content. And kind of to your point about, taking shots on goal, seeing what works, and then doing it again. Like if I look at my top performing reels, 90% of them are income reports. And so I'm like, I'm going to keep doing it, until people don't like it anymore. But I think a lot of people don't like it now, maybe until they stop performing well.
All right.
But I know I get so many messages from therapists who do like it and are like, I would have never known that this was possible. I would have never even thought that this was something that, a normal therapist could earn. Thank you. And so, some people really enjoy it, and I will keep doing it.
I'm remembering now, I think I saw the Business Insider piece, or you had posted about the Business Insider piece, and I remember sending it to our social media manager, and I was like, we need to connect with this person. Because you just don't see therapists talking about finances, and there's all of this just like secrecy around it, and I think a lot of shame as well. And at Herd, we're all about financial literacy and kind of pulling the curtain back on what that actually looks like in private practice. And so the fact that you're actually like posting not just what your income is, which in the tech world there's founders and CEOs who build in public and they'll post like their revenue and stuff online. But it's sort of half the picture, because it's easy to say, I made $250,000 in private practice, but like, what were your expenses? And you didn't actually make that much money, right? Because you had to pay taxes. And,
totally.
So the fact that you actually like break that down and show not just like what your total income is, but also like what your expenses were and where that income's coming from, I think is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think it would feel like disingenuous to share the revenue without the expenses. Just because I think that it's so misleading for people. when I made $250,000, I don't have the number in front of me, but my expenses were quite low at the time because I was really in a season of hustle. I was doing a lot myself. It was my first year in business. I didn't have a lot of systems. But now like I pay my team $10,000 to $15,000 a month because I'm much more in a season of slowing down, like scaling up while scaling back my time. And so like, I think that that's really helpful to show people that you're probably not going to get to the point of like $100K a month on your own. And if you do, that's really not going to be sustainable. And so like kind of not comparing apples to oranges there as well. And just kind of having a better understanding of what goes into running a business like that.
What I've heard is that if your content on social media isn't making at least like someone mad, it's like probably boring.
Yeah.
Like, so it's okay to like be a little bit controversial as long as obviously you're not like causing harm to anyone.
Totally.
Right. But like, there's going to be people who love it and there's going to be people that hate it. And like, I think that's okay too. Cause like those people aren't for you anyway.
Yeah. One question I found I've been getting a lot lately too is like, you know, I've been scaling down my therapy hours a lot as I've been kind of building the second business of therapy. But I still include my therapy income in my income reports, but it's like $1,000 or $2,000 a month now because I have a very small number of clients. And so I get a lot of questions from people, I think, who are finding my page for the first time that are like, you know, you're telling people that they should be a therapist and earn a ton of money, but you're not really making any money doing therapy. Like you just have to be a business coach to make this. And I think that that's one reason why I always go back to I earned $250,000 my first year in private practice, because you can make really good money as a therapist. Just because you do doesn't mean that you have to like do that forever, right? Like I can choose and say, this feels really fun and exciting to me, and it's kind of where I'm wanting to spend my time. And that doesn't mean that like being a therapist is less profitable or less good, or that I'm a bad business coach because I'm not, you know, also full-time in private practice. And so I just want to give people permission, kind of the same of like changing your mind with your niche, right? You're allowed to change and build and grow. Maybe you decided to start your private practice with insurance and now you're deciding you want to go private pay. Like whatever it is, you're allowed to take stock and inventory at any time and say, this is what feels good to me. And so this is kind of like the direction I'm going to move in.
How do you think about balancing your private practice with your business coaching, with content creation? And like, how do you manage all of that without burning out?
So it's definitely been like a work in progress over the years. I've not taken any new therapy clients in over like a year and a half. Like I've not discharged anybody from therapy because I wanted to focus more on business of therapy. That hasn't felt good to me. Although, you know, I certainly could take that option. But my caseload has just kind of naturally decreased over the years. When I was first kind of started making that transition, I saw therapy clients on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Then it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now it's just Thursdays. And so I think having like a specific day of the week where I kind of have my therapist hat on feels really good to me. I try and do most of my content on Mondays, but you know, I'm kind of showing up in stories a little bit every day. So that can be a little all over the place too. And then the business coaching, the courses, the membership, like that's really kind of my main focus at this point.
I'd love to dig into the business coaching. So we talked about the Instagram Reels membership as something that you offer. I know you also offer a private practice academy bundle. Could you talk about like other ways that you work with private practice owners?
Yeah. So I've helped over 500 therapists, which is so wild, in my course, the Private Practice Academy bundle. And that is basically like 3 courses that are your comprehensive roadmap to building a 6-figure practice. So the first course is Business Essentials. And so that's where I kind of take like parts of business school, I guess, and teach people. There's some basic like bookkeeping stuff. I brought in an attorney to talk about like LLC, S Corp, like whatever, all that stuff that's a little over everyone's head. Getting your website set up, getting your Psychology Today, picking your fee, how to use Mentaya, like all that good stuff. And then there is I would say the meat and potatoes of the course is about 8 hours of Instagram marketing, from everything to how do you like actually tutorial wise do a reel or make a post in Canva, to more importantly, like how do you actually use Instagram to sell your services? How do you come up with content ideas? How do you collaborate? How do you run Instagram ads to fill your caseload? Like all of that. And then there's a third course on scaling that talks about things like brand partnerships, coaching programs, hiring an associate, all the different ways that therapists might want to scale. And yeah, there is like a VIP option for that. That's $200 a month, where we do like 2 group coaching calls. There's kind of like a private messaging board where people can ask questions and get feedback. And so that's been really fun. I just started the VIP option almost a year ago at this point, but it's been fun to kind of get to actually know the therapist inside of the PPA bundle more and get a feel for where they're at in business and be able to give them, some more personalized support.
I love that you have different tiers for engaging with you. So for listeners who are thinking about offering, similar services or expanding beyond one-on-one therapy, almost creating this like menu of offerings where, you can start at $47 a month with the Reels membership, which is like relatively affordable, right? Like up to this course. And then there's a VIP membership. I also know you offer like one-on-one, even like full day coaching intensives I've seen, which is cool for therapists who just like want to like spend more time with you and dive super deep.
Yep. Yeah. So I see a handful of like literally one handful of like private coaching clients. So I do that in a few ways. I have a few long-term clients who I'll work with for 6 months at a time, and we meet 3 times a month and kind of have unlimited messaging support in Slack in between. And then for more like short-term options, I do intensives, which is like a 90-minute coaching session virtually, followed by 4 days of Slack support, or a VIP day, which is a full day. They're so fun of like, we meet up at a WeWork, we do a coaching session that's 90 minutes in the morning, we go get a good lunch, kind of talk business, all that stuff, do another 90-minute coaching session in the afternoon, do something kind of fun and celebratory, and then have that week of Slack support as well. And so it's really fun to be able to spend a lot of time with people in their business. I love with my one-on-one coaching clients, whether they're long-term or an intensive or VIP day, like really getting my hands dirty, going deep. I'm like looking at their sales page together or typing things up. I really love to be in therapist business with them. And so it's really cool to be able to do that.
And I imagine at the high end, it kind of feels similar to the sort of like anxiety of charging $250 or $275 initially, right? For a therapy session, like charging thousands of dollars for coaching. But I also think it self-selects for people who are serious about their business and, motivated and willing to make that investment. And ideally they're seeing positive ROI, right?
Yep.
And like you're delivering a ton of value to them.
And I'll typically tell people if they're just getting started, like you're really much better off starting with my course, the Private Practice Academy bundle, getting your feet wet, understanding this stuff and putting it out there. And then when it gets to actual like implementation, the nitty gritty refining, that's when I think it makes sense to hire a coach. But like it would be a waste of their time. I'm happy to do it, I guess. But like I wouldn't want them to pay $5,000 for a VIP day and me to sit there and show them how to use Canva, right? Like that's not going to be a really good return on investment. Instead, I would much rather do, you have a full caseload. How are we going to scale and create a course and build this out? Or how do we increase the number of people enrolling into your program and, all of that.
I'm curious of the 500 therapists that you've helped through your courses and programs. Are there common challenges that you see or questions that they have that you help them work through? Yeah.
I would say niching down is like the biggest challenge and probably what we spend the most time on during VIP calls is really helping people with that. Definitely, I would say like the imposter syndrome and challenges with, especially if you're already established, like increasing your rate and kind of changing the way that you're doing things in your practice, I think can feel really hard for people. And so it's great to have support around, what does this look like? Hearing from, dozens of other therapists saying, I did this too. It's okay. People are going to stay. You're not like a bad person, I think is really huge. And then I would say like time management and figuring out how can I kind of like make this Instagram thing work in my current schedule, especially I think before people start seeing results is when there's kind of like that biggest tension there of it does take a lot of time to make Instagram content. And it's hard to like kind of prioritize that when you're not getting clients from it just yet.
It sounds like it's less actually about the tactical business stuff and more about mindset a lot of the time.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the business stuff, I feel like not to toot my own horn, but I did a good job of laying that out like step by step by step. And then actually like having the courage to implement it and take action, I think is where people get a little hung up sometimes.
Definitely. You mentioned that you have a team that, you work with. Who is on your team? What does that look like? When did you start kind of bringing people on board? Curious how you've approached that.
Yeah. So the first person I hired was my sister, and I hired her like 2 or 3 months in. She was in medical school at the time. And I was like, I don't have time to be making these Canva graphics. I was like brand new to Instagram. I still have my full-time job, but I was like, I'll pay you $20 an hour. I wrote what was going in the graphic. I'm like, you design it and send it to me. So she was doing that, was kind of my first thing. And then I hired someone off of Fiverr, I don't know how you say that word, to write some Sit with Kelly captions and some blogs. And for probably my first year and a half, that was my team. So very, very part-time support. We didn't like have meetings or anything. It was just like kind of, you take these things I don't have time to do. Then after that, I hired a virtual assistant. Her name is Rachel, and she was a grad student to like studying to be a therapist at the time. And she just kind of helped with like other random marketing stuff of not at all like driving the ship of marketing, but I would be like, hey, can you kind of be an extra set of hands and like do these tasks? She's been absolutely wonderful. She's been with me for almost 2 years now and is now my operations manager. And so she really kind of is like the project manager for my business. So she's kind of giving me my tasks that I have to do every day, kind of like delegating to everybody, making sure that we're on track for things with launches and all of that. And then I have a full-time executive assistant who's kind of replaced my sister. She's a doctor now, so she's no longer interested in doing my Canva graphics.
Probably charging more than $20 an hour.
It doesn't make any sense for me to pay her what she needs to get.
Right.
But so my executive assistant does lots of random things now. She helps with emails. She helps with making the Canva graphics. She's now kind of like that extra set of hands. She'll take a lot of tasks on my to-do list and get them kind of 70 or 80% of the way there. And then I kind of, put that final touch out. And so that's been really cool to have full-time support. She just came on in May of this year. So scaled quite a bit without it, but it feels really, really nice.
Typically when therapists think about growing their business, that it's growing into a group practice and hiring other therapists. And so I love that you're presenting this model of like, this is a different way that you can do it.
Totally.
Like you can offer other services, you can offer coaching, have courses, and like you still need support and to build out a team, but you're building just a different kind of business. I'm curious, was growing your practice into a group practice ever a consideration of yours?
I had an associate for like 6 months. I didn't love it. I think so. I hired somebody that was fully licensed, and I had been, when I was in nonprofits, I managed a team of like 60 people and felt like my job was just like HR fire after HR fire. So I didn't really want to like manage a team again, but I was getting tons of clients from Instagram. I was full. I hadn't started coaching other therapists yet. So I was like now I'll always refer to people in my programs, and that feels really good to me. But I was like, why am I sending, all these people to others? Like I should just have somebody on my team. And so I thought that it was going to be like that simple of just like, I'm going to hire somebody. I'm going to send her clients from Instagram. She'll do the sessions. I'll never have to talk to her, and it'll be free money. And that was like not the case. I think that she probably could have used some more support with like selling and intro calls and client retention and all of that, and just ended up deciding that like she could take clients and kind of part ways. I do think obviously group practices can be a really profitable model, but they take, any income takes like investment and work. And that was just not the kind of work that I was really excited and lit up by.
Yeah, it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, finding your niche and trying different things. And, you try the group practice model, and if you don't like it, like that's okay too. There's no shame in that, and building a different kind of business. We're coming to the end, unfortunately, of this conversation. Kelly, this has been really amazing. I was excited to chat with you, and you definitely delivered.
Thank you.
I'd love to know, what's one thing that you want therapists to take away from this conversation, if they only take one thing away from the last from the last hour?
I would say like sit down with yourself, like open up a journal or a piece of paper and dream really, really big of like, if you didn't have to worry about anybody's judgment or what you thought was possible, like what would your dream practice look like? And then find the courage to like try and actually go after that dream, because I think that there's so much possibility and it's going to look so different for everybody. So like, as hard as it is, like try and take out the noise of even Kelly says you should be on Instagram to have a great private practice or whatever. Like, what does that actually look like for you? Because there's a zillion ways that you can build a profitable business as a therapist. There's a zillion ways you can structure your schedule and your life. And I think just getting really clear on what that is going to open up so many doors for you to really build a business that you love, that gives you a life that you love. And at the end of the day, like that's what I really want for therapists more than anything.
Well said. Could you share your website again? I know that you had mentioned it earlier, but just, for folks who are interested in, learning more about the services that you offer.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Business of Therapy, or my website is businessoftherapy.com. If you listen to this podcast, I would love for you to send me a DM. Let me know what you thought about it. And yeah.
Amazing. And you have a podcast that's coming out.
Yes.
As well, by the time this airs, your podcast will be out. So definitely go check that out. That's Business of Therapy as well.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Herd Business School, brought to you by Herd, the financial back office for therapists. Visit the Herd Resource Hub at joinherd.com to support you in your journey as a private practice owner. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next class.